Well, hi, this is Chris. Welcome back. The date is May 3rd, actually, May 3rd, 2016, year of our Savior. 16, and it's going to be Bible study number 46. Bible study number 46. And the title of this is going to be Roman Catholicism Part 3. Yes, Roman Catholicism Part 3. A lot to cover. All right, so we'll see if we can make it through. All right, so we see that the Roman Catholic Church became so corrupt in the Middle Ages that many men rose up and protested against it. The pagan doctrines of the Roman Church began to be rejected, looking instead to Jesus Christ for truth and salvation. In response, the Roman Church called these true Christians heretics and bitterly persecuted them. And we see that Revelation 17, verse 6 says, actually I'm going to have my brother read that. Revelation 17, verse 6.
Revelation 17, verse 6. And I saw the woman drunken with the blood of the saints and with the blood of the martyrs of Jesus. And when I saw her, I wondered with great admiration.
Okay, so we see here that this woman, this city, this is Roman Catholicism, and it's been drunken. I mean, not just killing some, but drunken with the blood of the saints and with the blood of the martyrs of Jesus. The Christians are the most persecuted. I know we've been brainwashed, folks, but understand that the Christians are the most persecuted on earth. Okay, so we see that Will Durant stated in his book, The Story of Our Civilization, by Will Durant, Simon & Schuster, 1950, volume 4, page 195. Will Durant stated, quote, compared with the persecution of heresy in Europe from 1227 to 1492, the persecution of Christians by Romans in the first 3 centuries, that's pagan Rome, by the way, after Christ was a mild and humane procedure. So what was going on with the pagans were doing to Christians, it was mild. Making every allowance required by an historian and permitted to a Christian, we must rank the Inquisition, that's controlled entirely by Papal Rome, or Roman Catholicism, along with the wars and persecutions of our time as the darkest blots on the record of mankind, revealing a ferocity unknown in any beast. Even beasts don't conduct themselves this way. So we see that the Inquisition means the act of inquiring. It was a judicial or official inquiry or examination, a formal Roman Catholic tribunal, court of justice, for the discovery and punishment of heresy, an opinion of doctrine contrary to the Roman Catholic Church dogma. So that's what heresy is, disagreeing with Rome. So you see, a dissenter from established church doctrine was known as a heretic. The term Inquisition comes from the medieval Latin inquisitio, which referred to any court process that was based on Roman law. Every citizen in the Roman Catholic Empire was required to be a Roman Catholic. Deviation from this oath of allegiance was considered treason and punishable by death. One of the documents that ordered the use of torture to elicit confessions against heretics was called Ad Extirpanda. This was a papal bull issued by Pope Innocent IV on Wednesday, May 15, 1252. Now, the authorization of the use of torture by the Inquisition or Roman Catholic government for eliciting confessions from heretics was confirmed by Pope Alexander IV on November 3rd, 1259, Pope Clement IV on November 3rd, 1265 AD, Pope Nicholas IV, he lived from 1288 to 1292. And then we have Pope Boniface VIII, 1294 to 1303, and the list goes on. So it wasn't just one pope. So we see that the use of torture is the infliction of intense pain as from burning, crushing, or wounding to punish, coerce, or afford sadistic pleasure, torturous, cruelly painful. This explicitly authorized the use of torture for eliciting confessions from heretics, which those who deviated from Rome, during the Inquisition, and explicitly condoned the practice of executing relapsed heretics by burning them alive. The bull conceded to the state a portion of the property to be confiscated from convicted heretics. And now not only do they torture you and kill you, but they take your property, and the government makes a profit from it. And then you see the state in return signed the burden of carrying out the penalty. This document stated that heretics were to be crushed like venomous snakes. Crushed like venomous snakes. So you see, priests, kings, and lay members of the Roman system were called upon to join in this crusade of terror. All right, one of the most popular and excruciating forms of torture used during the Inquisition was called the rack. The rack was a torture device usually consisting of a rectangular wooden frame box with a roller at one end or both ends. Quote, the victim's ankles were fastened to one roller and the wrists are chained to the other. As the interrogation progresses, a handle and ratchet mechanism attached to the top roller are used to very gradually increase the tension on the chains, inducing excruciating pain. By means of pulleys and levers, this roller could be rotated on its own axis, thus straining the ropes until the sufferer's joints were dislocated and eventually separated. Additionally, if muscle fibers are stretched excessively, they lose their ability to contract, rendering them ineffective. So you're just maimed. All right. Quote, one gruesome aspect of being stretched too far in the rack is the loud popping noises, snap, crackle, pop, made by snapping cartilage, ligaments, or bones. One powerful method for putting pressure upon prisoners was to force them to watch someone else being subjected to the rack. Confining the prisoner on the rack enabled further tortures to be simultaneously applied, typically including burning the flanks. Now, the flanks are the fleshly part of the side between the ribs and the hip. So you're looking at this area here, you're being tortured, and now they're burning that area in addition to. Now you have they burn it then with hot torches or candles using pincers made with specially roughened grips to tear out the nails of the victims and toes. Usually the victim's shoulders and hips would be separated and their elbows, knees, wrists, and ankles would be dislocated, end quote. It's taken from Wikipedia under rack torture. All right, so here's another quote. To the medieval Inquisition, everything was permitted. The Dominican, those are special priests. Now, understand that the priests were involved in the torturing of heretics, Bible-believing Christians. Now, the Dominican inquisitors, being the Pope's appointees, were subject to no one but God and His Holiness, the Pope. They were outside the jurisdiction of bishops and of civil law. In the Papal States, they were a law unto themselves, acting as prosecutors and judges. Their guiding principle was, quote, better for 100 innocent people to die than for one heretic to go to free, end quote. That was their mantra. Better to kill 100 innocent people, okay, than to let one heretic go free. Now, they operated arbitrarily and in total secrecy. By papal command, they were explicitly forbidden to have mercy on their victims. Okay, pity was unchristian where heresy was concerned, end quote. And this is taken from Vicars of Christ, The Dark Side of the Papacy by Peter de Rosa, 2000, page 164, ISBN number 1-84223-000-8. Now, Roman Catholic apologists or defenders claim that the atrocities committed during the time of the Inquisition was the work of the state, and that the papacy was not responsible. The truth is, quote, the binding force of the laws against heretics lay not in the authority of the secular princes, but in the sovereign dominion of life and death over all Christians claimed by the popes as God's representatives on earth, as Innocent III expressly states it, end quote. That's taken from the Pope and the Council by J.H. Ignace von Dillinger, London, 1869, page 195. Now, Sir John Emmerich Edward Dahlberg Acton the First, also known as the First Baron Acton, January 10th, 1834 to June 19th, 1902, known as Sir John Dahlberg Acton, 8th Baronet from 1837 to 1869, and usually referred to simply as Lord Acton, was an English Catholic historian, politician, and writer, who called the Inquisition, quote, murderous, and declared that the popes were, quote, were not only murderers in the great style, but they made murder a legal basis on the Christian church and the condition of salvation, end quote. Red-hot heavy pincers. The Inquisition evolved in the imaginations of the papacy as to the methods of torture that would produce the most pain and suffering. Heavy pincers were used to tear out fingernails. Pincers were a hand tool used to pinch, cut, or pull an object out. Pincers, often red hot, were used as an instrument for torture in ancient Roman times. The Roman Catholic Church brought this ancient form of torture back. The red hot pincers were applied to sensitive parts of the body, creating great pain. Remember, the more pain, the better. All right, so we see there's a picture here of medieval pincers found in Hamburg or Harburg, 15th to 16th century. Now we got the boot torture. The Middle Ages was a period in time dominated by the papacy. Quote, the medieval period of the Middle Ages was violent and bloodthirsty. In these barbarous times, the cruel and pitiless torturers were induced to inflict the horrors of tortures, including the boot torture on prisoner's seat. Torture methods, devices, and instruments were used to inflict the deliberate, systematic, cruel, and wanton infliction of physical and mental suffering. There were no laws or rules to protect the treatment of prisoners who faced torture, such as the boot torture. Torture was seen as a totally legitimate means for justice, to extract confessions, obtain the names of accomplices, obtain testimonies or confessions. Continuing the quote, methods of inflicting the boot tortures, different types of torture were used depending on the victim's crime and social status. There were also different tortures used according to the customs of each country. Various tortures were invented to inflict excruciating pain on the feet. The advantage of these types of torture was that the victim rarely died. The Spanish boots were high boots made of spongy leather. It had been placed on the culprit's feet. He was tied on to a near table near a large fire, and a quantity of boiling water was poured onto the boots, which penetrated the leather, ate the flesh away, and even dissolved the bones of the victims. These, continuing the quote, nice big picture here. There were several types of foot presses. The foot press consisted of a pair of horizontal iron plates which tightened around the foot by means of a crank mechanism and had these big spikes. So you put these presses on the boot and they have spikes, and as you crank them down, they pierce into your feet. Now, designed to lacerate the flesh and crush the bones of the foot. Variations were added, including the addition of hundreds of sharp spikes to the plates, and horrifically, a crank mechanism was connected to a drill so that when the instrument was tightened around the foot, a hole was drilled in the center of the inset. Foot roasting was also a method commonly used. The soles of the feet were smeared with lard and slowly roasted over red-hot coals. A bellows was used to control the intensity of the heat, and screen could be interposed between the feet and the coals as the victims was questioned. If the questions were not answered satisfactorily, the screen was withdrawn and the naked soles were again exposed to the flames. Foot roasting was inflicted during the persecution of the Knights Templar. Their leader, Jacques de Molay, was burnt until his feet were charred to the bone, resulting in his foot bones, metatarsals, falling to the floor. End quote. Now it's taken from actually an interesting website, LordSandLadies.org, torture. So folks, this is hatred. This is the gospel of Jesus Christ. This is what Jesus was preaching about. Jesus was preaching about love and forgiveness, not about hate and torture, folks. So you have to understand this. In the Middle Ages, continuing a quote, in the Middle Ages, burning was used both as a form of torture and as a capital punishment. As a form of torture, the victim's feet could be held to a fire trapped into metal boots that were heated up, or they could be strapped into an iron chair with a fire lit underneath. or red-hot irons could be applied. All right, you take your choice. Metal torture instruments were often heated, pincers, pliers, and so on. Burning or molten liquids could also be used, the victims being forced to dip limbs in them or even having them poured down their throats. According to the Talmud, the, quote, burning mentioned in the Bible is done by melting lead and pouring it down the convicted person's throat, causing immediate death. The particular form of execution by burning, in which the condemned is bound to a large stake, is more commonly called burning at the stake, end quote. And that's taken from www.medievalwarfare.info/torture.htm. Medieval torture, burning. Now, we see other forms of torture. We have the Iron Maiden or Iron Virgin. Was a medieval torture device. It was a hollow instrument the size and figure of a woman, consisting of an iron cabinet with a hinged front and spike-covered interior, sufficiently tall to enclose a human being. The knives were arrayed in such a way and under such pressure that the accused heretic was lacerated in its deadly embrace. The Iron Maiden device was sprayed with, quote, holy water, end quote, and inscribed with the Latin words meaning glory be only to God. Wow. A different gospel and a different Jesus, folks. And this is important why I talk about the Word of God. You want to go by a Roman Bible? This is the source that has butchered men, women, and children through torture. Okay, let's continue with the quote. The first reference to an execution with the maiden that has yet come to light stems from August 14, 1515 AD. Although the instrument had been in use for several decades by then, that day a forger of coins was placed inside and the door shut slowly. Quote, slowly, so that the very sharp points penetrating his arms and his legs in several places, and his belly and chest, and his bladder, and the root of his member. Yes, his penis, and his eyes, and his shoulders, and his buttocks, but not enough to kill him. And so he remained making great cry and lament for 2 days, after which he died, end quote. And that's taken from medievalwarfare.info, medieval torture Iron Maiden. Now, then we have a quote here. Quote, victims, after being stripped of their clothing, naked, especially women, had their arms tied behind their backs with a hard cord. Weights were attached to their feet. The action of a pulley suspended them in midair or dropped and raised them with a jerk, dislocating joints of the body. While such torture was being employed, priests holding up crosses would attempt to get the heretics to recant. End quote. That's taken from Babylon, Mystery, Religion, Ancient and Modern by Ralph Woodrow, 1966, chapter 14, The Inhuman Inquisition, page 107. All right, all sorts of amazing pictures here. Now we got the Pilgrim Church. A little background here. The Pilgrim or true church existed for 1,000 years before the Reformation. That's where the Reformation got its source. See, a lot of people go, oh, you Protestants, your religion's only 400 years old. Wrong. Ignorance. Okay, so this is the inspiration that Martin Luther and other reformers drew from. The true church consisted of multitudes of Christians that were never a part of the Roman system and refused to be called Catholics. They weren't reformers, folks, because there's no need to reform them. Okay. Now, I know you're Catholic historians. You believe that, oh, well, they're occultists. Okay. But these non-Catholic Christians separated themselves from the Whore of Babylon. Quote, in the alpine valleys of Piedmont, there had been for centuries, that's hundreds of years, congregations of believers calling themselves brethren, who came later to be called, widely known as Waldenses or the Vaudois, though they did not accept the name. All right, so they trace their origin and those parts back to apostolic times. So now we're getting back into apostolic Christianity. That's what we're about, is getting back to New Testament apostolic Christianity. This is where they borrowed from. This is what they continued, this tradition. Like many of the so-called Cathar and Paulician and other churches, these were not reformed, never having degenerated from the New Testament pattern as had the Roman, Greek, and others, but having always maintained in varying degree the apostolic tradition, end quote. This is taken from the Pilgrim Church by E.H. Broadbent, 2013. Should be a book in every Christian home. ISBN number 978-188-2701-537, page 111. In southern France, these brethren who met apart from the Roman Catholic Church were numerous and growing. These brethren were called Albigenses, a name never used by them. Waldenses, poor men of Lyons, and Bogomils in the surrounding countries were the churches spread among various peoples. Now, Pope Innocent III launched a crusade against these congregations of people who met apart from the Catholic Church. Quote, the Pope, who in 1209 AD proclaimed a crusade against him, the Count of Toulouse, Raymond VI, who ruled in southern France, and his people, indulgences such as had been given to the Crusaders, who went at great risk to themselves to rescue the holy places in Palestine from the Muslim Saracens, were now offered to all who would take part in the easier work of destroying the most fruitful province of France. This and the prospect of booty and license of every kind attracted hundreds of thousands of men. Under the presidency of high clerical dignities and led by Simon de Montfort, a military leader of great ability and man of boundless ambition and ruthless cruelty, the most beautiful and cultivated part of Europe at that time was ravaged, becoming for 20 years the scene of unspeakable wickedness and cruelty, and was reduced to desolation. You wonder why they had Muslims coming in, because they killed all the people to protect the buffer. Hello? All right. So, continuing the quote, when the town of Béziers was summoned to surrender, the Catholic inhabitants joined the dissenters in refusing, though warned that if the place were taken, no soul should be left alive. All right, so the town was captured, and of the tens of thousands who had taken refuge there, none was spared. Several historians report that 60,000 in this city perished by the sword while blood flowed in the streets. All right, persecuting Bible-believing Christians. The dragon, instituted by Rome. After the capture of another place, La Minerva, about 140 believers were found, women in one house, men in another, engaged in prayer as they waited their doom. Simon de Montfort had a great pile of wood prepared and told them to be converted to the Catholic faith or mount that pile. They answered that they owed no papal or priestly authority, only that of Christ and his word. The fire was lit, and the confessors, without hesitation, entered the flames. Continuing the quote, it was near the spot in the neighborhood of Narbonne that the Inquisition was established, 1210. Under the superintendence of Dominic, the founder of the Dominican order. So now you have Dominican order, a priesthood that has launched the Inquisition against Bible-believing Christians. The Inquisition finished what the crusade had left undone. That's taken from the Pilgrim Church, as I mentioned earlier, pages 110 to 111. So let's break this down. Let's say you have special ops, you have special forces. You have special forces, American special forces. These men, mighty men of valor, okay? They've been in the thick of it, blood and guts. So they come back and they're seasoned, all right? And so now there's a crusade. And all young people, and let's say you got this guy, this Simon de Montfort, he's special forces, okay? He has special forces. And now they launch a crusade. And all these men come and join it. And you know what? Instead of fighting against these tough enemies of the Muslims, of Christianity, what do? They go in and they slaughter men, woman, and child, and they destroy the cream of the crop of France. Okay? That's what transpired. And that was a crusade. And that, folks, killing men, women, children, that was an appetizer, folks. This was a crusade launched. Okay, so if you want to call it a crusade, you want to call it a Holocaust. Okay? You want to call it genocide. You want to call it whatever you want to call it. But this is an appetizer. I mean, have you ever had an appetizer? It's just beginning the meal. We're just beginning the meat grinder, folks. Now we're getting into the Inquisition that was launched by what? Launched by the Dominicans. Launched by priests that are the mediators between God and man. Sacerdotalism, folks. Okay. Launched by priests. And these people, oh boy, talk about torturing people. Started with Dominic. And that's where you get the Dominican order. And that is the foundation of the Inquisition. And that's where we're going to get, folks, we're just starting the torture, okay? And then we embrace Roman Bibles, and we think we're going to have, oh gosh, we need a revival. You're not going to have a revival by Roman Bibles, okay? Because Rome is the one who murdered and killed and slaughtered and Holocaust and genocide Bible-believing Christians, men, women, and children. Sadistic, folks. Absolutely sadistic. All right, so let's move forward. How much time do we have, Stephen? All right, 1 minute left. So we see that the Pope put his stamp of approval upon it. The Pope stated that by engaging in this crusade against the heretics, Bible-believing men, women, and children, they would immediately enter heaven upon death, and that they would not even have to pass through purgatory, which is the middle place between heaven and hell, to get there. Now, purgatory is not found in your Bible, but it is found in Roman Catholicism, okay? So that's what we're talking about. See, the Pope says, hey, if you participate in this crusade, so it wasn't just the crusade. Have you ever seen the Kingdom of Heaven launching against the Saracens or the Muslims? No, there was also a crusade, you don't hear about this, but a crusade launched against Bible-believing Christians, against the Paulicians, okay? We'll pick it up next time. All right? God bless you, and read your Bible. Embrace it. Thank you.